Bonjour tout le monde. Hello and welcome. My name is Dylan Penner. I'm an organizer on the steering committee with the Canadian Boat to Gaza, also a steering committee member and founding member of Independent Jewish Voices, and we're here today to welcome back two of the Canadian delegates who were on board the Tahrir as part of Freedom Waves to Gaza, and as you're likely aware, were illegally abducted by the Israeli military in international waters and held for many days, and finally just arrived back in Canada this morning. So with that, I will pass the mic over to David Heap, who's a linguistics professor at University of Western Ontario, who is on the Tahrir and is also an organizer with the Canadian Boat to Gaza, and Ehab Lotayef, a network engineer at McGill University, who is on the boat and is also an organizer and steering committee member of the Canadian Boat to Gaza. And also, just to note, if there are any questions en français, David can field those. So with that, David will go first.
Bonjour, merci d'être là. We came to Ottawa, among other things, to lay a complaint. We're filing a complaint with the Canadian authorities because Canadian citizens, among other nationalities, were attacked in international waters on our way to take humanitarian aid and challenge the illegal blockade of Gaza in an unarmed ship. We were illegally boarded. We were illegally captured as individuals. I myself was attacked with a taser, an electronic charge. We were kidnapped, taken from our intended declared destination, even though our boat had no arms of any kind on it, which they said they wanted to inspect. The Israelis agreed that there were no arms of any kind, but they still abducted us and our boat to the Israeli port of Ashdod, where we were illegally removed from our boat onto Israeli soil and then charged with entering Israel illegally. No formal charge was ever laid, but they told us this was an illegal act, even though the illegal act was committed by them. We were then searched extensively. Again, nothing suspicious was found on anybody, and held against our will for 5 days, 6 nights in Givon prison in Israel. Near the city of Ramla in Israel. And I would like to stress that this imprisonment was illegal even under Israeli law, which requires that migrants be expelled from the country within 72 hours. So it was almost double the period under Israeli law for which they're supposed to be allowed to hold people. But as we were told repeatedly by different Israeli authorities, all of whom told us different stories and different lies throughout the period of our detention, this is not a matter of law, this is a matter of policy. So clearly Israeli policy is not to respect international law, it's not to respect the physical safety of people, including Canadians on the high seas, and it's certainly not to respect the human rights of the Palestinians of Gaza, who after all have been living under this arbitrary and illegal rule for far too long. I'd like to turn it over to Ehab now, and then we'll take questions.
Earlier this summer, in June, the Canadian Boat to Gaza with other boats from the International Freedom Flotilla tried to sail towards Gaza. At that point, Israel extended the blockade of Gaza to the ports of Greece through arm twisting and through financial bribing. It managed to get Greece to do its bidding and prevent boats from leaving from Greece. It was very important that we as citizens of the world, with the complacent silence of the governments, to show that we can and we insist to continue in waves. If we can't go as a full flotilla with 10 ships, we'll go in waves of fewer number of ships towards Gaza, and we succeeded. 2 ships left from Turkey, went to Gaza a week ago, and Israel was totally surprised by our presence in international waters. Only when we declared ourselves did they know that we were coming. They decided to attack us in international waters, abduct us, and tow us or commandeer our boat towards the port of Ashdod. When we refused to embark and we said we don't want to be on Israeli soil, our heading was not Israel, they took us by force. They carried David, they dragged me and everybody on the boat in the same way and took us by force and kept us for 6 days or 6 nights against our will. We really discovered through that time how Israel is really a rogue state, does not abide by its own laws, where the laws kept changing day after day. We were subjected to psychological torture in our imprisonment. We were denied paper and pen. We were denied watches. I'm a Muslim. I spent my Eid day in there. I asked for a Quran. I only got the Quran 5 days after, in a country where 20% of the population is Muslim. We really learned a lot from that experience. We learned how the Palestinian prisoners who have been there have been suffering in the tens of thousands in Israel. Our experience was nothing to compare to them, but we can imagine now how they have been living for years and years, some of them. In closing, I would like to say that, again, this whole issue is not really about us, it's not about our experience. It's about the collective punishment of the people of Gaza that the whole world is silent about. It's about the illegal and inhumane blockade of Gaza that the whole world is silent about. And that's why citizens of the world, like me, like David, like Karen, like many Canadians and non-Canadians, have been trying to challenge, because we believe and think that this blockade is illegal and it has to end. And we will continue in the waves, in freedom waves to Gaza, to challenge this blockade till it ends. And last but not least, with this rogue behavior of this fascist apartheid government of Israel, we hope that the Canadian government would wake up and stop saying that Israel values are Canadian values, but the total opposite. Canada should take a very strong position towards Israel, and all countries that respect the rule of law should take such a position and really be very firm and strict with Israel in the way it treats international law and citizens of other countries. Thank you.
So they're happy to take any specific questions.
Were either of you detained? I mean, were either of you tortured while you were detained?
As Ehab says, the physical treatment was when we were actually boarded and attacked, and then I was injured when they removed us illegally from the ship to the shore. While on shore, things like sleep deprivation, waking people up in the night, leaving fluorescent lights on all night, and then threatening people I was threatened with solitary confinement, changing the story constantly, saying you're going to go home soon. Ehab signed a document the first night which said he would go home within 24 hours, and then he was there for 5 or 6 days like the rest of us. So that sort of jerking around is an attempt to destabilize people and discourage people. And I think the lesson to take from this, and authoritarian states haven't learned. I mean, they tried this in South Africa. They tried this elsewhere. If you try to bully and intimidate people, the movement just comes back stronger. We were there with a dozen Irish men. There were 2 Irish women in another block. Year and a half ago in the 2010 flotilla, there were 3 Irish people. Far from being intimidated, the more they try to bully people, the more they try to intimidate this movement, the more that freedom waves will come back until the siege of the blockade of Gaza is ended.
And maybe just to add a couple things quickly, 7 of the people from Ireland were allegedly released today, and we're due to go back. They made it as far as the airport, where they were actually abducted again by Israeli forces, and they were then told, okay, you can go again, and they returned to the airport finally after the increased grief that this caused for their families back home. 5 of them were apparently able to leave, but 2 were abducted again at the airport twice in one day. So just to underscore what David was saying in terms of the attempt to disorient and demoralize and really engage in psychological warfare, in essence, against international citizens. And just to reiterate, as we noted earlier this week, that we're calling on for John Baird to resign for a couple reasons, namely that he's essentially doing the job of the Israeli ambassador here in Canada, and if he really wants that job, he should apply for that job. Because he's clearly not interested in representing the interests of Canadians or of upholding human rights throughout the world, which really should be his job. So if there are any other questions or closing comments.
I'll just add to that one of the steps that I personally said by signing that I don't want to go through, I don't need to go through, which is seeing as a judge, which should happen within 72 hours of your abduction or of your holding by Israel. When we finally saw a judge, the judge told us that he doesn't understand why we are here. He doesn't understand why I'm still here. The darkness, the lack of information, the blackout of reaching any information from the world, reaching us as detainees, which is what is happening with the Irish right now, I presume, who were with us last night, who were waiting for their plane this morning, and by the morning come, they did not leave, and then we heard just lately that 5 of them left and 2 are still held. This is unacceptable psychological torture that should not happen in any country that tries to say that it's a democracy, which we clearly can see that it's only a democracy for some people, and for others it's a fascist state.
Just on this point, the media blackout, one of our demands as part of a political prisoners committee with the Irish who were with us was to have access to world news and to have access to phone calls. We got, after 48 hours, we got 1 3-minute phone call which was monitored and recorded by prison staff. In my case, it was cut off after a minute because I was speaking Canada's other official language to my spouse. They didn't like that. They cut it off until they found a prison guard who could come in and snoop in my call in French. There were signs on the wall throughout the prison that said, if you are an illegal migrant held here, you have the right to have a phone, provided it doesn't have camera. You have the right to make a phone call with a phone card. We asked for phone cards, and they said, "Okay, those laws don't apply to you. You're not normal migrants. You're special migrants. We have special rules for you. We won't tell you what they are, but you can't have phone calls." We had no press. We had one newspaper that the Irish consular staff were able to bring in on Saturday, which the 16 of us read very thoroughly. And by the time I left, we had no books, limited access. By the time I left, my cellmate was rolling cigarettes with the same paper. But the consular staff of Canada, I have to say, did a professional job. They did. Our dispute is not with the civil service. Our civil service still contains, professionals who do their job for Canadians like us who are in a difficult position. Our problem is with a government which, on the one hand, has a rhetoric about being tough on crime, but when it's a matter of international crime against citizens who are engaged in peaceful humanitarian work, all of a sudden we have a government which is very soft on the crimes of the State of Israel.
I heard that there was a document that you were being asked to sign to admit that you were guilty of entering illegally. What happened with that?
The document that we were given to sign was in Hebrew, and the English translation that we saw did not have this part. It was about accepting to be deported without seeing a judge. You don't object to your deportation. But the most important point is that any document we were shown or any document we signed really at the end of the day had no weight and had no value because they were making the laws for us as we go, and the laws were changing. As I said, the judge himself who saw us said he doesn't understand how could this be the case. And at the end he did acknowledge that your situation is a political situation. The decision is being taken day after day. And we also have to realize that this coalition government that is in Israel right now, the Minister of Interior can be from one party, the Minister of Defense from another party, and they themselves might not agree, and we don't know under whose jurisdiction do we fall. So it was really a lawless situation all in all.
I mean, to be very clear, in Ehab's case, he was told on Friday night when we were brought to Ashdod, he was told, if you sign this, you will be deported within 72 hours. Or sorry, within 24 hours. He signed. 48 hours later, he signed again on Sunday. 48 hours after that, we saw a judge who said, you should have been gone Saturday. So they weren't even obeying their own laws in the case. So, I mean, the difference is if you sign, you're being held for 6 days. If you don't sign, you're being held for 6 days. Both of them are illegal under Israeli law. And this sort of arbitrary treatment is a microcosm of what the Palestinian political prisoners and the Palestinians of Gaza put up with week in, week out, year out. We were jerked around a little bit, but ultimately we had a consular staff we could appeal to. We have civil society in Canada we can appeal to. Nobody else is standing with the Palestinians of Gaza or with Palestinian political prisoners who, as Ehab said, number in their thousands, who are subjected to far worse than this for far longer.
And that's why we sail, and that's why we'll continue to sail, because we don't want to be the focus again. We want the focus to continue to be on them. Thank you.
Thanks. And maybe just one last quick point. One thing we've been underscoring throughout this is that this is a blockade not just of imports into Gaza, but exports out of Gaza, and blockade of the free movement of Palestinians to and from Gaza. We learned in a media report just late last night that Israel is now apparently all of a sudden lifting the blockade of exports of furniture out of Gaza, which seems to imply that they were pretending that furniture exports from Gaza were a security threat for the last 4 years or so, which again just highlights the injustice of this and frankly the ridiculousness of it, that this is really not about security, it's about collective punishment of the people of Gaza. And we'll leave it at that for now. If you want any follow-up interviews, feel free to be in touch and we can try and arrange something. Thanks.
As we learned to say from our Irish comrades inside, Chuki Anlar, our day will come, notre jour viendra.